Good morning, everyone. I have two fine gentlemen and colleagues, John Acosta and Jonathan Dawson, joining us for today's live stream. I'm Tom Klein, of course, from Better Vantage Point, and John Acosta and I are really excited to be in Atlanta next week to give a part of 1.5 day seminar with Jonathan Dawson at the Pinnacle Training Center. So let me first toss it over to you, Jonathan. Tell us about the Pinnacle Training Center, what you're doing there, all the exciting stuff, and then we'll get into what we're going to cover on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Well, my pleasure to be here, Tom, and thank you for the opportunity. John, always good to see you as well. The Pinnacle Training Center was created with one fundamental question in mind. How do we continuously, systematically help our people succeed? And when I created the Pinnacle Training Center, I wanted it to be a resource for automotive retail dealers to be able to send people of all departments to improve their skill sets and their overall effectiveness and efficiency of their roles. So within the Pinnacle Training Center umbrella of things that we do, there are 5 core competencies that we try to address on a regular basis. We have content for sales teams, content for management teams, content for finance teams, content for service teams, and content for lead management teams. And those are our 5 kind of cores. And then we have ancillary or supplementary additional content and courses, workshops, and seminars for very more niche opportunities, very much like the one that we're about to discuss, the CYA class, Cover Your Assets. So in this case, this particular event is for dealer operators, owners, and executives who are financially and legally responsible for the store. And so we want to create an opportunity for where your risks lie, and of course, where your opportunities to cover yourself, protect yourself, and of course, make sure that your business doesn't go under because of some foolish mistake or oversight. So the Pinnacle Training Center offers classes monthly, instructed by industry leaders and influencers, people who've got a great track record of helping dealers in specific areas. And that is what the training center is all about. It's located just north of Atlanta, a quick 35-minute Uber ride from the airport.
Great. Thanks for that. I just want to add on to that, to those who are listening and watching. Be careful about getting a case of what I call a case of the yets, that I haven't had a problem yet, and therefore I don't really need this class, or I don't need to understand what you guys are doing, because the yets happen, right? It happens all the time. Last year we saw fines of 3.3 million, 10 million, 27 million, 1.25 million, both from the attorneys general and the Federal Trade Commission. I know of an instance where the IRS came in for a $2 million fine for not doing IRS 8300s correctly. So don't get a case of the yets. This stuff happens, and that's one reason that we're doing this class. But before we get to that, let's talk to John Acosta. John, please introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do, please.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure connecting with you and John and Jonathan Dawson. That's I'm just honored to be here amongst these incredible gentlemen and years of experience. So we're experts in cybersecurity for dealerships and IT services. A big part of the FTC compliance nowadays is cybersecurity safeguards to make sure that those yets don't happen. Some of those yets are the end of the road for some of these dealers that are in the medium-sized business that have 3, 5 rooftops. This can be a devastating event that can bring the whole organization down, and not only from a ransomware perspective, also from a class action perspective. Really is going to be a life-changing, legacy-changing event, and our job is to make sure that dealers are safe, secure, and protected navigating these treacherous waters.
Great. Well, first of all, if you need a good reason to come, dinner on Jonathan Dawson on Tuesday night. That's for sure.
That's a good reason by itself.
That's a great reason. But secondly, violations of the Grahmn Leach Bliley Act, which goes back to 2003, but each violation is $50,120. And the FTC has not defined what a violation is, or if you have a data breach, whether that's one violation or if you have 10,000 names, if that's 10,000 violations. That has not been determined by the FTC. So And these, and just so everyone is aware, these fines are not covered under your insurance policies unless there's one exception, and I'm going to talk about that, but you have to come to the seminar in order to get that pearl of wisdom. So let's go back to Jonathan. Jonathan, we have a day and a half designated with John and me and Mark Burkholder and David Gibson. Why don't you give everybody a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about, and then John and I can drill into the areas where we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we created the CYA class, we wanted to ask essentially where are the greatest areas of risk or exposure that a dealer or an operator has by operating their business in general. So one of the areas of exposure is, of course, government compliance, legislation, breaking a law, breaking some sort of something that, and of course, we all know every year, I don't know what the number is, but it's some obscene number of thousands of pages of laws are, written by Congress every single year, right? So we know that there's so many potential loopholes and ways that the government can come after a dealer from a compliance perspective. So compliance is obviously a really important place where a dealer needs to have a great understanding of where their risk and exposure is likely to occur, and of course, what tools and resources to put in place. So that was one area. The next area we wanted to do is in the cybersecurity and the data threats is, what happens if my store is under a data attack? If I'm getting hit with a ransomware or some sort of, data breach, how do I, number one, prevent it from happening? And what are my steps in the event that I feel like I have been exposed? And so we want to make sure that we're covering that, because that's a very real risk right now. And, you think about it as a dealer, it's not just that my data got taken, or it's not just that my data got locked. It's then the PR nightmare that can happen after that. I can only imagine if I'm a customer and there's a news story about a dealership that all their data I'm not going shopping there, right? I'm not going to give my business to those people. So you deal with the ramifications and the repercussions after the fact. The ripple effect is also devastating, not just the initial effect. So we want to cover that. The third area then is in taxes and wealth management. Another great area of risk to a dealer is your financial exposure as an income generator. You generate a lot of revenue, and the government wants as much of it as they can get. And once they have it, they're not likely to give it back to you, right? So how do you protect yourself from the way that your structure is set up as an individual, as a corporation? Just how do you make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do, paying what you have to pay, but not overpaying, and then making sure that you have a legacy plan in place for protecting what you've built. A lot of dealers, again, don't really examine these things until they realize it's too late. It's like insurance. We don't think, do we have the right insurance, until we're now in an accident and now we're going, how come I didn't have the right insurance? So we want to do what Tom was saying. We want to prevent the yets syndrome and not say, well, this hasn't happened to me yet. I'm not worried about that yet. Let's be proactive. So that's it. Then in the fourth area is going to be my area, which is your staffing. And I want to spend some time talking about the next area of exposure, which is, am I capturing market share the way I need to because my staff is operating at the level that I need to? Because here's the next area of risk. If you have an underperforming sales team, if you have an underperforming organization, you're at the risk of the market shifting and your people not being able to pivot correctly, or not being proactive with the market, and losing market share. And once you lose market share, once you lose a customer, the likelihood of you getting that customer back is incredibly low. So how do we make sure that our people are maximizing the opportunities at our store from a recruiting, hiring, and staffing and onboarding? I'm going to be talking about attracting high quality people, retaining and training those people. And so that's a summary of what we're going to be covering over the day and a half. And then, of course, dinner on Tuesday.
Yeah, dinner on Tuesday. Don't forget dinner on Tuesday. So to follow on with two comments you made, Jonathan. Number one, I spent an hour and a half on the phone yesterday with a client and an underwriter talking about their cyber policy. I had, 25 or 30 questions that we went through with the underwriter, and the underwriter didn't know the answer to a lot of the questions. And you can bet that in that policy, the questions that I was talking about don't help the dealer, they help the insurance company, right? And because insurance policies are written so that they favor the insurance company. So an hour and a half going through just one policy and what they'll pay and what they won't pay. Part of what a lot of cyber policies do pay is reputational damage resulting from a breach, which you mentioned. But sometimes there's a sublimit on that. And it's also, you have You're going to have to prove that. There's a lot of tentacles, to use that analogy, because you see an octopus over here. There's a lot of tentacles to those issues. And on staff, to follow on a comment there, remember there's risk with having disgruntled employees. Disgruntled employees go to the EEOC. They file lawsuits. They fire up other employees, make them less productive. These soft cost losses are very real. And when you have one bad apple, it creates more bad apples. And so that is a true part of risk mitigation at dealerships, is making sure you have for example, do you have a channel? Do your employees know that if they're disgruntled, that they can come to either their manager, or if their manager's the problem, do they know they can go to the dealer? Do you have an open door policy? So important to have that open door policy, or at least something in your employee guidebook that says, hey, if you're unhappy, we don't want you to be unhappy. Please go see the personnel, right? The HR department. Whatever it is, have a policy, have a method, have a way for them to go, because otherwise it'll get worse. Or what's even worse about that is you'll find out the problem when you get the EEOC complaint, and then you're going to have to deal with that. And then there's problems with what you do and retaliation, and there's, on and on it goes. So I agree with everything you said. But just shifting over to John Acosta for a minute, tell us about the live hacker that you're going to have, which is super interesting and exciting. I'm really interested to see it, because I haven't seen anything like that. I think it's a great idea you had. I know Jonathan and I are both excited about it. So take a minute and talk about the live hacker, John Acosta.
Yeah, so we had to pivot a little bit. He had a previous engagement with Homeland Security. He's really an incredible individual that spent some time breaking up dark web rings that are just up to really bad stuff. So he asked me, and he's like, "Hey, can I have this speaking engagement with Homeland Security and the federal government? I need to maybe I can do the next one." And I was like, "Man, saving kids' lives and trafficking, that's way more important than this. Go do that." So I was really just happy to get his input on our presentation, and really is what he provided is the anatomy of a hacker. It's like, why are dealers such a juicy target for hackers out there, right?
And why are they, John?
Yeah, why are they, right? And we'll talk about that during the presentation. It's I'm going to provide some really surefire ways of safeguarding yourself, of making sure that you have a plan, that you have a backup, that you have an infrastructure to make sure that you are not exposed. And if that exposure happens, who to contact, how to get in contact with the right people as fast as possible, because time is the most critical part of this formula, to make sure that you're not in trouble, and that your fortress is safeguarded, and you don't have the hordes of Mongols throwing dead bodies into your castle, so to say.
So part of risk mitigation is having a moat.
Yeah, having a moat. Yep, absolutely. Having enough food to survive a long-term siege. So there's some pretty straightforward strategies that have been established by the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. There's a cybersecurity framework that if you implement those things, you're going to be in pretty good shape to be able to survive and recover from one of these events. God forbid one of those things happen. And what I'm really trying to come up with is changing the yet to thank God, right? To thank God we had backups. Thank God we had a plan. Thank God we had insurance. Thank God we had those, because most people go through not yet, and then that event happens, and they're like, well, we had to look at the deep recesses of our dealership to find out if we had that one clause that said we are covered during this event.
Right. And so, John Acosta, you're doing how many sessions?
So I'm going to be doing 2 sessions. One is understanding GLBA. It's going to be a 30,000-foot view for dealers, just to understand the broad strokes of what the bones of what GLBA brings, right? Is to really demystify what that regulation is. A lot of people don't understand the intricacies, or don't want to understand the intricacies of IT. I totally understand that. I get it. It doesn't make you money, but it does protect your assets, right? And then the other portion is the anatomy of a hacker, and then really understanding for dealers why there's such a lucrative target for somebody that's in, a hacker that's in Romania, in a dingy basement that, makes $100 a month, suddenly can make the, retire off of your one jackpot. So that's
Right.
that's kind of the understanding the anatomy of a hacker.
Okay. And for those who don't know, the GLBA or Grahmn Leach Bliley Act deadline was June the 9th. So
Correct.
dealers, you were supposed to be compliant by June the 9th.
Yeah.
If you are not compliant by June the 9th, you'll have John Acosta and I to talk to and to help you get compliant during the day and a half, as we are experts on that topic and really can kind of dumb down the whole thing and try to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Jonathan, is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of what Mark Burkholder and David Gibson are going to talk about?
Yeah, actually, so I met Mark actually at a national conference, an auto dealer conference, and sat through his presentation and was just impressed by how he makes math make sense. I think there's certain areas, and I'm going to, again, generalize our audience a little bit, but if you're a car dealer, generally speaking, you came up through the retail side. Generally speaking, you came up through the production side, the revenue side. It's like,
Right.
I just like making money. I'm very
Right.
good at making money. I'm very good at making departments make money. Typically, not always, but typically, if you're really, really good on the revenue side, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're good on the savings side or on the protection side. So what we do is we go, I don't really look at my tax exposure. I don't really look at my financial. I don't really look at my investment accounts. I don't really look at that. I just like making money. And so what Mark and David do is financial planning for high wealth, high net worth dealers, is help them look at their money and pay attention to it in a focused way that makes them ask new questions. I remember sitting in his presentation and afterwards having so many dealers walking out going, I have like 4 phone calls I have to make right now, because they're just like, I can't believe that I haven't thought about this stuff. But when you're in a production role, when you're in a revenue role, it's very easy to keep looking at that kind of like the top line numbers, right? And go, yeah, this is how much we grossed and this is how much, and we netted. Yeah, all that stuff is great. Obviously, operationally, we need that. But what are we retaining personally and organizationally? And how is it structured to protect it? And how is it structured to pass it on? These are things that a lot of dealers, like I said, don't really think about very often. And this is an opportunity to focus on those things. And so they're going to be unpacking for you, again, your structure, your wealth protection, your legacy planning. Do you have everything the way you should to make sure that you're not leaking money unnecessarily, or that you are, in fact, growing it exponentially the way you should. So I think this is just a great opportunity to get away from all the other distractions and look at what I'm going to call the semi-boring stuff, right? Semi-boring to talk about compliance, semi-boring to talk about IT, semi-boring to talk about taxes. Yeah, but they kind of literally can be the thing that costs you millions, and in some cases, your literal business. Everything you've built, think about every ounce of sweat, every hour, every minute you've put into something. Imagine it being all destroyed because somebody on your team clicked on an email they shouldn't. Somebody on your team said something or sent something to a customer that activated an audit, that because of that activated audit then went back into your history and found all these things. I mean, think about how fragile the relative house of cards we built is when it comes to our finances. So that's what this is all about. CYA, cover your assets. Let's make sure we're protecting them. So that's what they're going to be talking about. And again, I'm very excited to have everybody there, and looking forward, if you're a dealer, an operator, or if you're a member of management and sales, and you want to forward this on to your dealer or your owner, I guarantee they will thank you for it. They will say, thank you for bringing this to my attention. This was very helpful. So we're excited.
And John Acosta and I will second that. We promise that you will take away a litany of things to look at and think about. And one of your comments, Jonathan, was that most of the dealers come up through the revenue side, and that's absolutely the truth. Those are most of my clients, and one of the things that I tell them is it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep.
Yeah.
And if you don't have you can see under my name, it says GRC Consulting. GRC stands for Governance, Risk, and Compliance. And that's how you run your business, how your employees interact with your customers, how you manage your risk. Do you have enough insurance to cover problems, right? One of my seminars, one of my segments rather, is CYA, cover your ass. That's assets. and we talk about all the insurance policies and what you should consider. And there are so many. As I mentioned earlier, spent an hour and a half yesterday just on a cyber policy with an underwriter who didn't know what his policy said, or allegedly didn't know. I'm not sure which one it was. I guess we'll find out in the weeks to come. And then I'll be talking about risk mitigation at dealerships and what you should look for. I promise there will be plenty of actionable items, and I will be there. I'm going to be in Atlanta all week, so if they want to stay and talk afterwards, I'm happy to. Dinner again on Jonathan Dawson on Tuesday night, which I'm looking forward to. And final comments, John Acosta, before I bounce over to Jonathan.
Yeah, I just think that this is it's such a cool concept for dealers to get to a class that at one place they can get, you know, their financial side, digital compliance at one stop to shop for really protecting your long-term legacy, right? And say to really walk away with tactile operational things that you can implement as soon as you walk out that door. It's just, if I was a dealer, I would drop everything that I'm doing to come to this class, because it really is to protect, to cover your assets, and I think it's very appropriately named to be able to walk away with that.
Right. Final thoughts, Jonathan?
Yeah, you know, many of you have been to a national conference. You go to a big event like an NADA, Digital Dealer, some other type of event. And what happens, because I speak at them all the time, what happens is you're given essentially a 45-minute window of time as a speaker. And the first third of that is essentially trying to establish why you're even on the stage. A lot of times the first third of the whole 45 minutes is, let me tell you why you should listen to me. And then you got about 30 minutes that somebody has to compress, you know, decades of knowledge into one subject matter for 30 minutes. And then they still have to have time for wrap up, right? So what can you really get? All you can get in a setting like that is you can get the awareness of possibilities or problems. That's really what you can have happen in a 45-minute session at an event. Here, we're going to deep dive over a day and a half in these things. This is an intimate, interactive setting where you're going to now be able to deep dive and explore these topics and ask specific questions about your specific situation. This is a fundamentally different experience than going to one of these bigger events. And as John just pointed out, to be able to cross-section things like compliance and cybersecurity and tax and wealth management and staffing and making sure you have organizational staff right, like to have these four critical areas where you're at your most exposure. I think that to be able to do that all in one place, I'm very, very proud of what we put together. I'm proud of the panel we put together, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you there. Again, if you have assets, you want to cover your assets.
That's it. That's it. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for being on today. I enjoyed having you, and I'll look forward to seeing you to Atlanta next week. I'm
right.
Tom Klein. Thanks for seeing things from a better vantage point. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Tom. Bye.